Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm really happy to be giving a talk tonight. I've been thinking about this talk actually since the first 15 minutes officially of PyCon this year. How many people went to PyCon? How many people are going to go to PyCon next year?
Keep your hands up. This is where you keep your hands up.
So everybody has a different experience with Guido, and I met him in the hallway, and he said, "Man, I'm just so impressed by the scientific stack. You know, early on Python was trying to emulate science, and now science is really trying to emulate open source." And what really kicked that off was the kickoff by Jake Vanderklas. I think he's the author of Python. Is it Python for Data Analysis? He has a really great book. He said, really, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And what my talk on Anaconda deals with is you have these wonderful tools, you have this great distribution, I'm not sure how many of you use it, but really you're standing on the shoulders of giants who solved so many problems for you so that you could march through your simple command line interface or import pandas and run with it. So one of the people one of the giants whose shoulders we're standing on is this gentleman. That's John Hunter, the late author of Matplotlib, who, well, I'll just let this go. I'm going to try to hack this the best I can.
Remember exactly. But we showed up at his office, and there was no overhead audio-visual support, so there were about 5 of us, or maybe 6, and we huddled around my laptop, and I just, threw the PowerPoint presentation that I had brought in the garbage and said, well, I'll just, do some stuff, and you guys can watch and ask me questions, and we'll do it that way since it's such a small group and we don't have overhead. And we all had a great time, and Brian told me at the end of that was the best chipping meeting ever.
So as some of you may know, I'm scooping together all of our archived content, and I was really, really happy to find that. We used to do a lot of video with Chippy. That's the reason why I picked it back up. We had that sitting on archive.org, and there were certainly some interested parties that had to see that. Among them was this gentleman, Fernando Perez, who actually sent it over to his family. It was a video that he had never seen, and he had assumed that his family would not have seen it either. So that's Jason, it really is a family. So I was really, really proud to share that. So back to Anaconda though. Good heuristic for Anaconda is really the best of everything in the PyData ecosystem. And to unwrap that a little bit more, is this big enough for everybody? Yeah. Oh, okay. It's a platform agnostic Python and R distribution, so I'm running it on my Windows host at Bank of America. I'm also running it on my Linux machine at Bank of America. I'm running it on this machine. It comes installed with hundreds of open source binaries, some of our favorites like Pandas, scikit-learn, and Bokeh, or other visualization libraries. It includes Conda, which is a super powerful package and environment manager, and it's open source and free for you or your employer to use. So Anaconda adds a lot of value, which I'll highlight, especially at an enterprise level. And it really achieves that in a couple key ways. It's a big, big time saver. So if you've ever dealt with the Herculean headache of onboarding a new person, especially on an enterprise level team, or you're trying to get bootstrapped with a particular technology stack, oftentimes it's actually harder to onboard on the enterprise stack than an open source stack like this. It's easy to install. It's easy to onboard new team members. The export and import of environment files with Git integration is extremely trivial. It features really robust dependency resolution. I mentioned the command line interface, and it enables, it comes packaged together with tools built into enrich the transfer of knowledge, such as this Jupyter Notebook here. So solving practical problems, if I'm looking to do some sort of data science stack, I could actually have a small application going in about maybe a half hour. I would sit down in my machine, I'd log in, install Anaconda, create a couple of environments, install whatever I had to, create my virtual environment, maybe make a couple changes to it, and I could get going really fast and throw my code into production. One of the beautiful things about the proliferation of virtual environments is if you're on a huge enterprise scale where you're not necessarily changing, you're not necessarily controlling the code that's changing around you, bugs could be introduced, and if your code isn't sufficiently tested, and sometimes millions of lines of code aren't all sufficiently tested, your application may break. So it's a great idea to actually put your code into a small container where all the versions are hyper-controlled, where you're tuning the parameters just as you want. And so one of the beautiful things is the flexibility. It ensures that because all teams and services don't all follow the same patterns, you could pick the pattern that suits best for your team. So to give you just a little bit more background, I actually introduced 2 different teams to the Anaconda distribution of Python. A few years back now, I worked at a financial services company and introduced Python to their stack, specifically with the Anaconda distribution, and more recently gave an abbreviated version of this demo to my teammates at Bank of America. And really the emphasis is on building these microservices and tying them together, less downtime due to code breaks, and it's just a phenomenal open source project. So I'm going to stop talking about it and actually show you guys a couple of ways that this distribution really shines. We'll walk through the Conda command line interface, we'll go through a Jupyter Notebook, and hopefully we'll be looking better than that by the end. So let's go ahead and dive in. Cool. So just in case I forgot anything, I have a little helper for us to walk through. So some ordinary things that we could do with the Conda command line interface. So if we want to check out our version of Conda, we could check out something like that. Okay, so a fairly recent version of Conda. We could also see everything that we have within our current package with the Conda list command. And I wish this were just a little bit better. So that gives you some indication. Yeah, I knew this wasn't going to be nice to me, but there's a ton of packages in here. It's I don't know exactly how many. I'd actually encourage everyone to have a conversation with Jonathan Helmus, who's wearing an awesome shirt today, who actually works with Containment Analytics. But there's, I think, at least 150 packages in here that are ready to go without you having to install anything. So let's keep going. So we've seen everything in my environment. So what are my environments? I've been mentioning these little containers. Let's get some info about our environments. So we've got a couple Chippy Mentors things here. We've got something called Crude, Flask, whatever else. Let's say that I want to create a new environment. So if I do Conda, new environment, does anyone have a favorite open source package? Maybe NumPy?
Pandas. It's called Fuck It Pie. It's called the Steamroller of Errors.
Okay, we're going to install NumPy. And we're going to install it with version Python 2.7. Just kidding.
Yeah. I want to change that name too.
Oh, I got it. You're right, actually. So I'll go ahead. Jerry, why are you making things difficult? We're going to keep it. We're going to confuse whoever inherits this code. So we've installed a new package. We just created our environment. So now let's go ahead and do conda info dash dash ends. And I was expecting to see NumPy in there, and that's actually why I included a little cheat sheet. Oops. Let's try that again. Jerry, I think you're right. So conda, create, new environment, NumPy 3.6, Python, we'll do 3.6, and NumPy. Okay, so cool. This seems to be actually working now. So it's going to go fetch our packages. Yes, I want to install that goodness. It's going to go grab some things for us. And while that's cooking, I'd like to go through a couple things that I knew I would forget. So the difference between Conda and Pip. So Pip installs a package in any environment. So I could go into like a virtual env and I could install any Python package into that environment. Whereas Conda installs any package into Conda-specific environments. And the key is that you could start thinking about Conda differently, not just in relationship to Python. It's actually a general purpose software management tool. So if I wanted to install glib or OpenSSL, which are a set of C libraries and security protocols respectively, I can achieve that with Conda. More stuff, you can still run them side by side because there aren't binaries for everything in the Conda ecosystem. So you could do a pip install or a Conda install package. But the feature that you pick up with Conda is more meaningful tracking of non-Python dependencies and better dependency resolution. So these Conda packages are actually compiled binaries. And yeah, I can actually run Conda in Linux or Windows ecosystem. And like I said, yeah, live in OpenSSL. So let's go ahead and go back. We've got our NumPy 3.6 here. So if I go ahead and activate NumPy 3.6.
You gotta fix that.
Jerry, you're being critical.
No. Be supportive.
And now if I do a Conda list, that list of packages is much, much smaller. And you see that I have specific versions of my packages. So if I wanted to treat something specific, if I wanted to do something, some sort of treatment in this ecosystem, this NumPy 36 virtual environment I have here, or a Conda environment I should say, I could do that treatment, such as install Pandas. Yes, so now if I do a Conda, oh, you can
Install.
Cool.
Whoa.
Pandas takes a lot.
Cool. And you'll see now you got Pandas there in my environment. So we could also export an environment. So now I have this shiny new environment. Let's say that I'm making changes, I'm installing non-Python dependencies, I'm getting this just right for some sort of platform. And now I have to onboard a new team member, or I want to do some sort of version control. It's really easy to export environment files. In fact, I will show you, let's see, I still think it's in here. So if I go to, I think it's in here. So if I did export, yeah. So you could export environments to a targeted directory. So I could achieve that here, and I'll just look back at my trusty cheat sheet. So if I wanted to export an environment, I could do so like this. So I could do kind of export something. yada yada. But so it'll wrap that up into a YAML file. I could push that to a GitHub repo, kind of like this one here, and I can manage my repo. And that's what a Conda YAML file looks like. And if I were in the process of onboarding with a new team, I would set up a new directory, pull down the repo, use Conda to install that requirements file, and I'd have the exact same working copy of all the tools I needed. Okay. So that's everything I wanted to display within the Conda command line interface. Man, I wish this were cool. Okay. Yeah. So to wrap it up, it's an environment manager, package manager, capable of installing and managing Python itself. Those are things that Pip can't achieve. Robust dependency resolution, easy to export and unwrap these YAML files. Did I have more? Oh yeah, and there was one more part to this guy. So Jupyter Notebook. How many of you have seen a Jupyter Notebook before? They're pretty sweet. I was really impressed that I could put an MP4 file in there. I was actually doing that this morning. But they're really, really awesome. And I enjoyed that I was able to show the tweet by Fernando Perez because he was the original author of Jupyter when it was still IPython. So they're interactive. I could ask Jupyter to introduce itself. I could do really expressive forms of documentation, as you can see here. I could also access variables that I've defined elsewhere in my notebook. So if I wanted to introduce myself to say a bit more, say some more things outside of that. Developed while he was a graduate student in Colorado, formerly known as IPython. John Hunter and Fernando Perez were early collaborators because of the kind of match made in heaven with visualizing plots in IPython Notebook, which is really, really cool. I could also I have access to the standard library as well. So I could go ahead and import random, do some things with pretty printing, and I could get some anagrams of Guido van Rossum. And of course, we have all of our built-in power with Pandas. I get the feeling like a lot of you have seen some of the Pandas scikit-learn things, so I'm going to show you maybe a couple things that you may not have seen before. For example, Iris dataset comes built in with scikit-learn. I could see the data frame in line with my Jupyter Notebook, and I could even check out some really beautiful plots. This is with Seaborn, which ties down to some matplotlib dependencies. It's a really beautiful plotting library. I could also do something called Pear Plot, which allows you to visualize each variable in comparison to every other variable. Many months back, maybe 6 months or 9 months ago, Brian did a killer presentation on bokeh. And this is actually really cool. Maybe for the last, 3 or 4 months, I've primarily been doing D3 and JavaScript, but this is Python's answer to interactive data visualization in the browser. So as you can see, I could pan around this thing. I could zoom in on a particular point. It is really, really sleek. Finally, we could do our machine learning elements too. So if I wanted to fit a logistic regression model using the Iris dataset, I could go ahead and import the relevant libraries. I could massage my data, so I could target X being my independent variables, Y being my dependent variable. I could go ahead and train a model, use the logistic regression model from scikit-learn I could fit a model, and I can make some predictions off of it too. So for any of you who've gone through this iris data set, it's pretty killer. It was one of the early uses of machine learning, I think, generally speaking. And it's really cool that it's built in with scikit-learn. So as you can see, I do really, really well on this model. Unfortunately, they don't trade this sort of, they don't trade flowers. I don't think they're commodities yet. So yeah. So we did our Conda wrap up already. That's actually coming to the close of my presentation. There were some elements I omitted in the interest of time. You could create your custom Conda packages, so you could compile code down into binaries and push your custom binaries to remote repos, because obviously there's enterprise level software that is not all open source, so you still have the opportunity to do that. There's also this concept of Conda channels. One of the coolest demos I've actually ever seen was, sorry to keep picking on you, Jonathan, but it was using the Conda Forge channel, and Jonathan, so you have access to these binaries, and he was actually running a very like Python version 1 dot something before some of the core language constructs were even there. It's also well suited for high performance distributed computing applications, and if this is just too much, like you don't like that there's all this built-in business, there's something called mini Conda, which is just Conda. And then you could run from there with Pip and Conda side by side. So some things I hope that you can take away from this talk. Anaconda is a cross-platform Python distribution. There's hundreds of open source packages pre-installed. Conda is an environment manager, a package manager, and a command line interface. It's really, really powerful. It saves time and it empowers problem solvers with a rich set of tools. Open source, and it's suitable in just about every context. Oh yeah, I'm not sure you guys, so I was kind of lucky. I came across like an early, did you guys hear about this? Like there was some sort of leak about a change to the import this statement for Python 3.8. It's very recent. It's like in the last day and a half.
No.
Oh, you're gonna fail.
What does this do?
Okay. Well, I'm sorry you guys haven't seen this. So, all right, thank you guys. Thank you very much.